Right, so when is a terrorist not a terrorist? According to the UK government, it's when they're dropping bombs on hospitals, flattening refugee camps, or starving entire civilian populations into submission. But toss a tin of red paint onto a military jet in protest at that, and suddenly you're public enemy number one. Welcome to Britain in 2025, where protesting a genocide gets you branded a terrorist, and enabling one, well, probably gets you a seat at the cabinet table, doesn't it? This is the latest chapter in the twisted logic of Keir Starmer's Labour government, which is now seeking to proscribe the protest group Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation, not for planting bombs or threatening civilians, but for vandalising two planes with red paint at RAF Brize Norton and escaping on e-scooters. Under the Starmer regime, acts of political protest are now being equated with jihadist terror. Meanwhile, the UK continues to train Israeli soldiers, arm Israeli jets, and fly surveillance missions over Gaza for the IDF, all whilst maintaining that customary British stiff upper lip and insisting this is about national security and, of course, Israel's right to defend itself. The message, it seems, could not be clearer, therefore. Protest the slaughter of Palestinians and you're a terrorist. Assist the state in committing that slaughter and you're a patriot. But patriot to who? Because it's not going to be Britain, is it? Right, so yesterday it came to pass that a few determined activists managed what would seem in a functioning democracy to be a striking but symbolic act of political protest. They breached the security at RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire, one of the UK's most heavily guarded military bases, vandalised two aircraft using red paint and crowbars, and escaped on electric scooters, completely undetected, it would appear. No one was injured, no lives were endangered. The target was not civilians, but symbols of British complicity in an ongoing genocide. Military aircraft assisting Israel's siege and bombardment of Gaza. Later that day, though, news broke that Keir Starmer and Home Secretary Yvette Cooper were considering seeking to proscribe Palestine Action over this, the direct action protest group behind the incursion, as a terrorist organisation, no less. According to ministers, the activists were not protesters, you see, they were a national security threat. Well, if people on scooters armed with paint are capable of breaking into Brize Norton and get away again, I question the standard of that national security. A literal military installation has, for this alone, been made a laughing stock of, frankly. Far from protecting public safety or having anything to do with national security, this decision exposes something far more sinister. The UK government is attempting to criminalise dissent in defence of genocide using terror legislation against protesters to shield a foreign apartheid regime, no less. But this is not just a gross and grotesque overreach, it's a threat to the very idea of a democratic protest in Britain. And it comes at a moment of profound hypocrisy over the matter of protest as well, because this news comes literally just days after the Court of Appeal ruled that anti-protest laws, championed first by former Tory Home Secretary Suella Braverman, and now aggressively used by Keir Starmer, were unlawfully implemented and are therefore null and void. Unable to rely on those laws to suppress political opposition any longer, as we've seen them doing in numerous demonstrations, the government is now seemingly turning to something even darker in their determination to keep on outlawing protest, especially anti-Israel protest. Lawfare by terror designation now, branding human rights activists as extremists for daring to challenge a genocide the UK is widely seen to be complicit in. Palestine Action is not an underground militia, it is not an armed insurgency, it is a protest group of ordinary people formed in 2020 with a single focused goal, which was to end British complicity in Israel's settler colonial violence, which has been going on and on and on for decades, way before the events of October 7th, 2023. Their most frequent targets have been factories such as Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company, which manufactures drones and weapons tested on Palestinians before being sold globally as battle-tested, including from factories operating inside the UK. Elbit has shut down several UK sites due to Palestine Action's successful campaign of disruptive protests. More recently, the group's focus has expanded to include UK military sites and logistical hubs directly aiding Israel's genocidal assault on Gaza. The incursion into RAF Brize Norton was prompted by Britain's role in providing spy flights and intelligence support to the Israeli military. Flights originating from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus and British airspace have reportedly delivered surveillance data. They claim to be used in the search for those hostages that Israel are really not trying very hard at all anymore to rescue, but which could also be used to target Palestinian infrastructure and even Palestinian civilians themselves. And this is no longer a conspiracy theory. The evidence can be tracked in flight plans on the internet. Anyone can do it. We see these planes flying all the time from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus over Gaza, or heading that way before their transponders are turned off, so we can't actually see what they're actually doing. The UK has admitted these flights are happening. And yet the crime that has incited the wrath of Britain's political class is not the murder of tens of thousands of Palestinians, but a protest involving paint and scooters. But let's be absolutely clear here. No one was hurt during Palestine Action's protest. Nobody ever is hurt. You can criticise their methods, the vandalism they do conduct. But when you're not being listened to, and when you're peacefully protest, you can only escalate to gain attention by taking more direct action. And still, instead of listening, the government seeks to criminalise instead, because they have no intention of listening. The damage to the aircraft was largely superficial, intended to symbolise the bloodshed these missions facilitate in Gaza. This was not sabotage in the sense of rendering the aircraft permanently inoperable or attempting to detonate explosives. The tools were crowbars and tins of red paint. It's inconvenience. The message is a very simple one, though. Stop ignoring us. Stop ignoring the British people. And stop helping Israel bomb civilians in our names. And yet Starmer and Cooper are now going to pursue, apparently, the gravest possible domestic sanction available: terrorism proscription. Under the Terrorism Act of 2000, a group can be proscribed if it is deemed to be concerned in terrorism, defined so broadly that the term has been functionally emptied of its original meaning. If Palestine Action is banned, it would become illegal to support, promote, or belong to this protest group. Offenders could even face prison for doing that. Even sharing their material on social media could result in prosecutions. It fundamentally amounts to a full-scale assault, therefore, on freedom of speech, association, and assembly, our right to protest, fundamental democratic rights as these are. It signals that the UK government is now prepared to classify non-violent, anti-genocide protest as terrorism. The UK government is actively aiding a state engaged in genocide, but rather than reassess its role, have a look at itself in the mirror, it is targeting those exposing the complicity instead. Over 55,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in Gaza to date since Israel's genocide began, with thousands more injured, starved, or displaced. International bodies, including UN agencies and human rights organisations, have repeatedly warned that Israel's actions in Gaza amount to genocide. This has been demonstrated plausibly at the International Court of Justice. Hospitals are being bombed, water and electricity systems have been destroyed, journalists and aid workers have been deliberately targeted. Instead of calling this out, though, the UK has continued to supply weapons components, including those F-35 fighter jet parts used in bombing raids, conducted surveillance flights providing intelligence for IDF operations, continues to train Israeli soldiers at UK bases, and continues to meet with and defend Israel diplomatically, even in the face of overwhelming evidence of war crimes. To protest these atrocities is now apparently terrorism, though. But to facilitate them, that's a national security policy, it seems. This attack on protests is not unique to Starmer, though. The rot began, as I said in the intro, under the Conservatives, especially during Suella Braverman's tenure as Home Secretary. It was she who introduced sweeping amendments to the Public Order Act, criminalising noisy protests, locking on, and even organising spontaneous marches. Well, how dare these proles do such things? The kicker was the designation of protests considered more than minor being criminalised, though, a remit so vague and introduced via backdoor legislation that it was an absolute abuse of the right to protest. But the real betrayal lies in Starmer's response. In opposition, these measures of Braverman's were opposed, but in power now, rather than oppose this assault on civil liberties, Labour has enthusiastically defended Braverman's laws, including in court. Now the Court of Appeal has ruled that these changes were unlawfully made, and the government has thrown in the towel over that. It's all happened in the landmark Liberty versus Home Office case. Britain's most respected civil rights organisation, Liberty, proved that the government bypassed parliamentary process to suppress dissent. The result is that dozens of convictions under the unlawful laws now face being quashed. Rightfully so. Liberty celebrated, of course.
We've just found out that the government won't be appealing our legal challenge against anti-protest powers that were created unlawfully. That means that finally, these laws that gave the police almost unlimited powers to clamp down on protests for supposedly causing more than minor disruption and criminalised hundreds of people in the process are officially gone. We started this case 2 years ago, in 2023, when former Home Secretary Suella Braverman changed the legal definition of when police could place restrictions on protests from serious disruption to mean more than minor. We won this case in court twice, first against the Conservative government in 2024 and then again against Labour this year. Labour should never have wasted taxpayers' money appealing this case, especially since Yvette Cooper herself opposed these laws as they were going through Parliament.
What it is doing is giving the police the power to prevent any and every campaign group protesting outside a local library or swimming pool that is about to be closed because it may be a little bit more than minor. The government is simply making it possible to go after peaceful protesters and passers-by instead, even though that is not the British tradition.
We're glad the government has finally accepted defeat, but this doesn't address the hundreds of protesters who have wrongly been arrested under this legislation. The government should now commit to reviewing all arrests made under these unlawful powers.
But rather than learn from this, rather than accepting defeat gracefully, rather than accepting the right to protest, rather than accepting the rebuke, Starmer's government appears to have now shifted tactics just days after this defeat. If protest cannot be criminalised under civil law, let's try and reframe it as terrorism instead then. This is nothing short of totalitarian logic. It is utter authoritarianism, and all of it is for Israeli interests, not ours. That Keir Starmer is serving not British values but Israeli state interests in clamping down on dissent, it's not going to work one way, we'll try another, is increasingly impossible to deny, though Zionists will undoubtedly try. Starmer has repeatedly refused to condemn Israeli war crimes, even when footage and UN reports confirm the targeting of children, of journalists and aid workers. His standard response is to affirm Israel's right to self-defense, even in the face of one-sided slaughter. And now in seeking to ban Palestine Action, he's going even further, using Britain's anti-terror laws to silence protest on behalf of a foreign power. There can be no clearer demonstration of whose interests he truly serves, can there? Surely not. In his statement following the RAF Brize Norton protest, Starmer said, "The act of vandalism committed by RAF Brize Norton is disgraceful. Our armed forces represent the very best of Britain and put their lives on the line for us every day. It is our responsibility to support those who defend us. But whose values and whose interests are served by providing surveillance for the bombing of refugee camps, or conducting surveillance flights, or continuing to supply Israel with military hardware? Palestine Action's protest was not anti-British, it was anti-complicity. It highlighted that British soldiers are now facilitating war crimes on behalf of Israel, not protecting British citizens or national sovereignty. To criticise this arrangement is not treason, it is the duty. It's the duty of anyone with a moral compass. And yet those who speak up are branded extremists now, while the state that bombs hospitals and starves civilians is treated as an ally, and that has a right to defend itself. Palestine Action threw red paint on 2 military aircraft. They made a symbolic political statement. They escaped without confrontation, by and large. No bombs were set off, no hostages were taken, no civilians were harmed at all, and for this, they may now be listed alongside the likes of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Well, this is not just absurd, it's terrifying. It reveals that the UK government now sees activism itself as a threat, and if they get away with this, they will no doubt go further. It invites a future where any protest movement challenging entrenched power can be dismantled not by public debate, but by brutal repression. Across the UK, protests in solidarity with Gaza have continued, and they must continue for as long as government complicity remains. Civil liberties groups have condemned the government's move as dangerous overreach, and that's an understatement. Rights lawyers are already reaching out to Palestine Action to assist in fighting this ridiculous stunt Starmer and Cooper are allegedly going to try and pull. And many ordinary people are waking up and must continue to wake up to this sobering truth, that we are now living through the potential criminalisation of just having a conscience. The decision to prescribe Palestine Action is not just a policy dispute. This is a defining moment now. It asks us, all of us, to choose. Will Britain be a country that defends human rights, or one that crushes dissent to protect a genocidal foreign regime? Now, which side of that equation I sit on? It's not really a difficult choice, surely. But Keir Starmer seems to have made his choice, and I don't fancy he shares it with me. By branding anti-genocide activists as terrorists, he's sending out a clear signal. Criticism of Israel will not be tolerated, even if that means destroying the foundations of this democracy at home. But the story's not yet over. What happens now depends on whether we are all willing to speak up, doesn't it? Stand up to this draconian nonsense, not just for Palestine Action's sake, but for the right to protest itself. If the government succeeds in criminalising resistance to genocide, then the real terrorists will not be those holding the paint cans, but those holding power. Meanwhile, of course, apart from defending Israel's right to defend itself against its captive population in Gaza, He's also doing it after Israel started a war with Iran, and he's standing by the dressing up box just waiting for Donald Trump to give him the word so he can go all Iraq war, just like his idol Tony Blair, it seems. Get all the details of Starmer and his desperation to be a war leader in this video recommendation here, as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.